At 101, when most of his contemporaries have long since faded into the past, Dick Van Dyke still stands as a living icon, retaining his sharp mind, radiant smile, and a level of energy that makes younger generations tip their hats. Yet behind that gentle exterior, always radiating warmth and a love of peace, lies a secret that has never been told in full. After nearly 8 decades conquering Broadway stages, television screens, and Hollywood's classic films, did this legend truly never experience a moment of anger? The truth is completely different. Behind the dazzling spotlight and thunderous applause was a harsh backstage world, where enormous artistic egos, simmering jealousies, and fiery clashes were more than enough to destroy any relationship. Dick Van Dyke was never an emotionless saint. He, too, had days when his blood boiled, nights when he lay awake because of hurt, and above all, a list of 5 powerful figures who once pushed his patience to the very edge. But the remarkable thing lies in the way he looks back on it all. At the age of 100, when hatred has been worn away by time, he does not speak of them with bitterness, but instead offers a completely different perspective. How do you survive, preserve your self-respect, and even turn those who once made you want to lose your mind into some of the most valuable lessons of your life? What was the real relationship behind those smiles in front of the cameras? And who were the people capable of testing the patience of one of the most beloved men in the world? The first intense clash on the list did not come from a fellow performer, but from the man at the helm of the classic musical film Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, 1968, British director Ken Hughes. In theory, they were a perfect team on set. In reality, however, the story was completely different. Hughes possessed a sharp intellect accompanied by a cutting tongue and a deeply skeptical nature, an attitude that stood in complete contrast to Dick's open, warm personality and endlessly positive energy. An invisible distance already existed between them before everything finally erupted on a bitterly cold, rainy day on an English film set. It was the most deeply hurtful moment Dick had ever experienced in his career. While standing behind the canvas wall of a tent to escape the bitter cold, he happened to hear voices coming from inside. More precisely, it was a contemptuous complaint that Ken Hughes was directing at the producer, completely unaware that his leading man was standing just on the other side of the wall. How can I film a romantic leading man when he has a nose that looks like a bent water pipe? Those words felt like a knife driven straight into Dick's pride. It was not simply a criticism of his appearance. It was a mockery aimed directly at the face he had lived with, accepted, and carried for more than 40 years. The very face that had brought smiles to millions of viewers and was now being ridiculed as a laughable flaw. Overwhelming anger, intense embarrassment, and humiliation closed in around him in the damp atmosphere of the film set. At that moment, his resentment towards Ken Hughes was very real and powerful enough to consume all reason. Yet, the strength of a great artist prevailed. Instead of storming into the tent to unleash his fury or creating a major scene in front of the crew, Dick chose a response that commanded respect. He took a deep breath, swallowed his anger, maintained a completely professional distance, and stepped in front of the camera to give an outstanding performance as Caractacus Potts. He refused to allow the director's bitterness to ruin his own performance. Decades later, when recounting the story in his later years, Dick Van Dyke no longer showed even the slightest trace of resentment in his eyes. The wound from long ago had become nothing more than a bitter yet amusing backstage anecdote, a testament to how time and forgiveness can transform humiliation into something as light as a gentle smile. In 1963, Dick Van Dyke eagerly brought the resounding success of the Broadway musical Bye Bye Birdie to the big screen, reuniting with the beautiful leading lady Janet Leigh. Everything initially promised to be a dazzling cinematic experience, until the arrival of director George Sidney sent those expectations in an entirely different direction, turning the film set into a quiet battleground of favoritism and unfairness. The discontent began when George Sidney became captivated by the talent and dazzling star potential of young actress Anne Margaret. In the director's eyes, the spotlight seemed as though it should belong to her alone. Despite the story's original structure, Sidney repeatedly made visibly biased decisions. He did not hesitate to drastically cut the humorous scenes featuring Janet Leigh and Dick Van Dyke, while also breaking apart key musical sequences to devote nearly all the screen time and focus to Anne-Margaret's dancing. On the set, Dick and Janet quickly realized that they had been pushed to the margins of the story. From central characters carrying the soul of the film, they were turned into moving flower arrangements, little more than background props serving entirely to enhance someone else's moment in the spotlight. The feeling of being disregarded, the quiet resentment, and the frustration steadily grew inside Dick. It was not merely professional dissatisfaction, but also the hurt of seeing their hard work so blatantly ignored. However, the way Dick Van Dyke handled this bitterness reflected the strength of character and fundamental kindness at the heart of his personality. Instead of directing his anger at Anne-Margaret, who was completely innocent and simply trying to follow the director's instructions, he chose to protect her from the tensions behind the scenes. Dick diffused the situation himself by consciously changing his perspective, setting aside his wounded pride to smile brightly at the film's premiere, and even publicly praising Anne-Margaret's talent to the press. For Dick, professionalism and generosity of spirit were always greater than a wounded ego. Not every feeling of resentment or hatred comes purely from malicious intent. Sometimes it arises from an immovable wall of power and disagreement. And the fourth name on the list was none other than one of the most towering figures in global entertainment, the animation mogul himself, Walt Disney. The story began as the crew worked tirelessly to prepare the classic masterpiece Mary Poppins, 1964. Alongside the leading role of Bert, the chimney sweep that had already been earmarked for him, Dick Van Dyke wanted something more. His passion for the art of makeup was strongly drawn to the character of Mr. Dawes Sr., the elderly, miserly, and bitter bank treasurer. Dick believed that he could completely bring the character to life beneath layers of elaborate makeup. But Walt Disney rejected the idea outright and without hesitation. In the studio founder's eyes, Dick was simply a young, energetic television star who suited the cheerful image of Bert but could not carry the role of a stern old man. Moreover, Walt did not want to risk the film's style or spend a huge additional budget on complicated makeup simply to accommodate an actor. Walt Disney's determination collided head-on with Dick's stubbornness. The two became locked in a tense confrontation that reached such an impasse that Dick genuinely felt furious and angry with the powerful studio head for several days. Having a legend dismiss his abilities and stifle his creativity was a serious blow to an artist's self-respect. Yet the way Dick broke through that wall was deeply cinematic and carried his own distinctive sense of humor. Instead of giving up or swallowing his disappointment, Dick played a bold card. He returned to Walt Disney's office and offered to pay $4,000 out of his own pocket for a makeup test, simply to ask for the opportunity to transform himself into the elderly bank treasurer and perform the character. That persistence, bordering on the extraordinary, completely won Walt Disney over. The demanding mogul could not help laughing at Dick's passion and dedication and finally agreed to let him try. The result exceeded all expectations. The performance was so impressive that Walt was completely convinced at first sight. The Disney founder immediately withdrew his initial criticism, returned the full amount Dick had put down, awarded him the role, and forged a close professional friendship that would continue for many decades afterwards. Not every conflict comes from those at the very top of the power structure or from domineering directors. Sometimes the most uncomfortable tensions arise right inside the cramped waiting rooms shared by colleagues, where the pressures of fame begin to reshape relationships. The fifth person caught up in, and also contributing to, this tension was Rosemary, better known by her stage name Rosemary, Dick's veteran co-star on the classic sitcom The Dick Van Dyke Show, 1961. When she joined the project, Rosemary was an established star with an impressive wealth of experience, entering the production expecting to be a central figure and the main comedic counterpart to Dick. Yet, the world of television has always operated according to the ruthless rules of attention. From the earliest episodes, the writers quickly recognized the natural, charming, and explosive chemistry between Dick Van Dyke and the young actress Mary Tyler Moore. The focus of the scripts immediately shifted, revolving around the married life and comic interplay of the central couple. This change unintentionally pushed Rosemary into the shadows. From being a comedy cornerstone, her role was reduced and she became more of a supporting character around them. Faced with this disappointment, Rosemary could not hide her hurt and jealousy. The atmosphere in the waiting room suddenly became heavy and suffocating, filled with sharp looks and cold remarks between her and Mary Tyler Moore. Dick Van Dyke suddenly found himself caught in the middle. On one side was his veteran co-star, frustrated because she felt betrayed, and on the other was the actress with whom he shared his strongest on-screen chemistry. The pressure created by this quiet rivalry was a genuinely exhausting challenge for Dick, who always valued harmony within the group. Yet instead of choosing sides, joining in with rumors, or keeping his distance to avoid trouble, Dick chose a warmer path, compassionate neutrality. He refused to take part in the behind-the-scenes disputes, while always showing Rosemary the utmost respect, repeatedly praising her talent publicly in front of the cast and crew, and making sure she always felt that she was an indispensable part of the soul of the Dick Van Dyke Show family. That patience and genuine warmth eventually melted away the insecurities of their younger years. It was not until many years later, during a reunion of the original cast, that Rosemary and Mary Tyler Moore finally embraced one another in tears, completely letting go of the tensions of the past and maintaining a close friendship for the rest of their lives. A beautiful ending nurtured by Dick's steadfast presence in the middle of the storm. The final name on the list did not emerge from the sets of classic Hollywood or the golden years of earlier decades, but from the noisy and often turbulent world of modern media. Journalist and controversial television host Piers Morgan. While the previous four were colleagues who had experienced direct professional friction with him, Piers Morgan represented a completely different kind of irritation from a distance: social media. Everything came to a head when Piers Morgan repeatedly used his personal account on Twitter, now X, to post provocative, mocking and disparaging remarks about the non-binary identities of young people. For someone who had lived for nearly a century, experienced countless historical upheavals, and witnessed the transformation of humanity, Dick Van Dyke's worldview had been shaped by a deep understanding. Kindness, acceptance, and allowing every person to live authentically as themselves are the only ways society can move forward. Seeing an influential media figure use his public platform to bully and mock young people struggling to find their true identities made Dick feel deeply outraged and angry. It was not merely a difference of opinion, but a crossing of the boundaries of compassion. Yet Dick Van Dyke's response was completely beyond what the online world expected. Instead of getting drawn into a weeks-long war of words, writing lengthy posts to argue or insulting his opponent in return, as millions of people do every day on the internet, Dick chose a far more subtle weapon: sarcastic silence. He posted a screenshot capturing his own facial expression from the popular television series Diagnosis Murder. An utterly exhausted, deeply exasperated expression, combined with a helpless look at the absurdity of the world, accompanied simply by Piers Morgan's account name. That laughing through tears image immediately created a huge ripple across the internet. It was a gentle yet remarkably painful slap that completely silenced Piers Morgan's provocative rhetoric without requiring a single insult or heated argument. Once again, through intelligence and his sharp sense of humor, Dick Van Dyke proved that perfect disdain does not always lie in harsh words, but can instead be found in a weary, knowing smirk. Looking back on a life spanning almost an entire century, and the 5 names who had once made him angry, hurt, or deeply frustrated, Dick Van Dyke carried no bitterness with him. At 101, he sees all the conflicts, setbacks, and resentments throughout his career as nothing more than tiny ripples across the surface of a vast ocean. Life is far too short to waste one's mind nurturing hatred, because ultimately, resentment does not truly hurt the other person. Instead, it is the very thing that slowly eats away at and hollows out the soul of the person carrying it. The message this living legend leaves behind is a gentle yet profound reminder to anyone struggling beneath the pressures of life. Learn to forgive quickly, smile brightly in the face of insults, remain steadfast in pursuing your passions to the very end, and above all, always keep an optimistic song in your heart so that you can continue moving forward with your head held high. Life is far too short to waste energy on hatred, and if you are nurturing an inspiring story, article or script based on these valuable lessons, share your idea now so that we can start bringing it to life together.